Today's video takes place at Knollwood Golf Club, and this is on the new course. Over this 9-hole stretch, you're going to see two different double handicap golfers try to break 40, and hopefully you can pick up some tips and tricks about things to do and not do if you are also in the same pursuit. If you are new to the channel, my name is Jim, and I am currently a 10 handicap golfer, and my attempt here is just to keep this ball in play. It is out of bounds left, so I aim more to the right, and I manage to be just in the right rough. This is Dan, who is currently a 12 handicap golfer, and if you are not new to the channel, you will already know exactly what this shot is about to look like. Dan aims to the left and slices it all the way over to the right. It is a predictable shot for him, but unfortunately this one bounces a little bit further than he would have liked, and he's trapped behind a tree. And immediately we get to witness a really good learning opportunity, because as soon as Dan tries to go over this tree and chunk it, he acknowledges that he was trying to force the issue. As average golfers, we really need to limit our hero shots. If Dan was able to punch out for his second, he'd still have a chance to approach the green and possibly save a par, but now he uses this really great approach shot and he's just trying to save a bogey. And as for my ball,
it's pretty buried. Let's try and pop it up and hope for the best.
This is an example of letting the lie dictate your shot. I love doing flops, but I can't do that here because it's so buried, so I just punch it on the green and accept my birdie putt from anywhere. That anywhere happens to be about 20 feet short of the pin, and you can see that wind is absolutely blowing directly into me, and I try my best to get the ball there, leave it a little bit short, but that's a really stress-free par to start my round. And you can see how good Dan's approach shot actually was here, as he has a really short putt, he taps in for the bogey, and we move on to hole 2. This is a dogleg right par 5 that is reachable in 2 with a pretty good tee shot, and because I felt confident with the way my swing was with my first driver, I decided to use it again, and I put a really good strike on this thing with a little bit of a draw, and it ends up just in the left rough, but I still have a shot to go for the green in 2. Dan also has a lot of confidence with the driver on this hole because he can set up all the way to the left and let that thing move towards the right, but unfortunately because of how strong that wind is today, he ends up being a little bit further back than he's used to, so he has no chance to go for this green in 2, and we can see that he's got a little bit of tree trouble again for the second time, and he's going to still try and be a little bit aggressive here. Thankfully there's room to go left of the tree, and he doesn't have to try and go over, because his ball was pretty buried in the rough, which leads to him mishitting it, but he does still get over the hill and has a decent shot to go for the green from there. And my second shot is proof that just because you have a better lie doesn't mean you'll have a better shot, because I absolutely topped the crap out of that 5-wood.
Yeah, I think I'll play it like 130. Oh, Mikey's just flirting with danger here. He wants me to drop it in on him. Heads up, Mikey! Wow.
So after a couple bad shots and Dan's dad having a cameo in the video, it's a perfect time to remember that golf is fun. You don't have to play clean the entire time, and if you just manage the mistakes, good shots like this can follow. My ball ends up on the front left of the green, and Dan must have really liked that position because he also has a nice strike on this and ends up really close to where my ball is.
There you go, it's Dano's.
So by staying patient on this par 5 and handling our mistakes, we now both have birdie putts. And although neither of us made it, we were far enough away that it wasn't really expected. These are the nice kinds of 2-putt pars that make you move on to the next hole with a little bit of confidence. And that's exactly what you need on some tee shots like this. You can see that it is a very narrow space to hit through, and I'm fortunate that it sets up a bit better for a lefty here, especially if you can hit a fade. And although that was my goal, I did have the ball a little bit too far forward to hit this 5-wood, so I end up hitting a really nice draw, but into the wrong spot, and it leaves me in a really tricky position. And this is easily the hardest tee shot for Dan's shot shape, and he has to go right at this tree edge, and I don't really do a good job of showing what happened here with the tracer because it actually hit one of the branches and it kicked off a bit to the right, and he ends up in the middle of the fairway, which is nice, but he's pretty far back. He puts an aggressive swing on it, but I think he just fatted the ball a little bit, and he did get lucky that it rolled into the fairway.
And there's mine by a tree, but I can get by it, so I'm just trying to find that gap down there. I don't think I can hook it around.
And just like on the first hole, this is me allowing the lie to dictate my shot. You can see that my follow through on that tree would probably break my iron, so I decide not to be aggressive and go for the hero hook around the corner, and instead just punch it out into the middle of the fairway, and then try not to poke my eye out on a branch on the way back to my bag. And because Dan and I are on opposite sides of the hole here, I'm not able to get over in time to get a better view of this shot, but he ended up sailing it past the green and unfortunately lost the ball and had to drop behind. My third shot is attempting to get onto the green to save a par, but I end up pulling it a little bit to the right and I will be in the fringe. So here's Dan's 5th shot after his drop. He has a nice little touch on this one and he gives himself a chance to save the double bogey. And you're getting a good look at why this is easily the hardest hole on the course, because there just really doesn't seem like any room to miss. So I'm just trying to lag my putt up here to save myself a bogey, and there was a little bit of a misread on that green. Dan steps up to his putt, and he just misses the double, so he unfortunately has a triple. And I am fortunate enough that my putt does drop, and I'll take the bogey.
That's a hole that bogey feels like a par. I fought for that one. Dan was doing all right. That lost ball got to him. I'll take that one. +1 through 3. It's a good start so far.
And if you're enjoying this video so far, I would appreciate if you could like and subscribe. Hole 4 is a nice little break from that challenge because we have a very short par 3. And one of the things I like to do on a par 3 is to make sure that I club up 1 because the ball is slightly teed up. Unfortunately here I had the ball so low I should have just used a regular 56 and my 52 degree goes a little bit long right. And Dan does the opposite. He goes left and ends up getting lucky because he hits some branches here, but it goes through and he has a pretty clean look to chip on to the green here. So he still has a chance to possibly save his par. And that's a nice little pitch that's about pin high, but this green is something else.
We can thank all these trees for this beautiful green. Just covered. I mean, that'll be a fun putt.
And pardon my ignorance, but I have no idea what those things on the green are called. They have fallen out of the trees, and if you know, comment below. I do manage to putt through whatever they are and leave myself a chance to save the par, and after a little bit of tidying up, we can see Dan's putt just misses his par attempt and he taps in for the bogey. I get a couple more of those out of the way and my par putt drops in. Hole 5 is another par 5, which gives me the opportunity to bring my driver back out, and you can see that I'm teeing up on the far left side of this tee box. And the reason I'm doing that is because I'm setting up for my fade, so this gives me a little bit more room to aim to the right side. That's a lot of room to miss the fairway, and I hit a great strike here, and there's that little fade. I end up on top of the hill, and I will have a chance to go for the green in 2, being about 210 or so yards away. Dan sets up with his drive, and there it goes. It slices all the way off to the right, and this is a rare occurrence where he actually outdrives me. Look how much further ahead he is. Good on you, Dano. And I try to show you where the flag is here. There's a little tip of it that you can see just over that crest of the hill. So what I'm trying to do is hit a nice gentle 5-wood here to have a bit of a fade, but I end up keeping that face wide open, and I slice that puppy. I ended up needing to take a drop, which you'll see in a moment, but Dan's second shot is a pretty decent strike here. Unfortunately, he follows me left, but he is okay. He ends up just being in the rough, so his third shot is a bit of a pitch on here. And you can hear his response that he is not very happy with that shot. So here I am after my dropped ball. This is my 4th. I'm now trying to get this close enough that I can save a par, which I'll have to be content with. This is a very scoreable hole, and a birdie is always a possibility. But once you make a mistake like I did on my second shot, you have to readjust your expectations, and I do a really good job of pitching that close. Dan's birdie putt here is just a bit off to the left, and he's got a chance to save his par as well. I tap up to mine and almost miss it. Holy moly, was that ever close? You could see me breathe a sigh of relief. I saved the par, and Dan steps up, and he also taps in his par. Ends up being a pretty straightforward par 5 for us. Good hole. I forgot to take a picture of hole number 6, but this is a very sharp dogleg left, and this is an example of me playing my tee shot with the sole purpose of trying to set up my approach shot. I do not want to be left near that tree line because there is a large tree that might be hard to get over, so I aim well to the right, and it ends up in a pretty decent spot. Dan also goes over to the right, and even though we are about 20 or 30 yards further from the hole by doing this, the angle in will make it all worthwhile. And this view should give you a good reason about why we did this, because this is a very protected green, and even though the pin is in the middle, it's still difficult to get to it. I end up pushing this a little bit off to the left, and I will leave myself with a downhill birdie putt, but it is better than not being on the green at all. Dan ends up having a little bit of tough time out of the rough here, and he thins it all the way over the green, and this is another unfortunate ball that he has lost into the weeds. My birdie putt leaves a lot to be desired here, as I thought it was going to break in towards the hole, but I end up being off to the left, and I have a tricky par putt that I will have to fight for. Dan's 4th shot also takes a strange bounce off of that ridge, and he has left himself a very long putt for a bogey. And this is another thing to keep in mind, that if you are not keeping your ball in play, golf becomes even harder than it already is, as he just misses this putt and has to settle for a double bogey. After tapping in my par putt, we come to a par 4, and this is a nice wide fairway, so I have confidence pulling out my driver again. I set up to the right, and I try to hit that little bit of a fade, but it doesn't really go that way. However, because of the line that I chose, I end up being in the right rough, and it will be just fine. Dan sets up to the left and fades a little bit off to the right, and he ends up in the fairway. This is a very tricky hole, however, and the elevated green makes it a very small landing area to go to, and Dan puts a nice swing on this iron shot, but he ends up just a bit past the backside of the green. I can see that I come out of the rough here, and I put a really good strike on it. Because of the slightly downhill lie, I thought the ball would go more left, but it goes right, and at least I have a birdie putt.
Dan wanted me to put it in the hole. I did my best, but honestly, on this hole, anywhere on the green in 2 is a huge success. I do not have a birdie putt on this hole very often.
Dan is at the back of the fringe here, and he employs one of his favorite shots when he's around the green. He uses a hybrid and puts a little putting stroke on that, and he has some pretty good weight on it. It gives him a chance to save the par. However, I do not have very good weight on this putt, and I end up leaving this well short, as even though my attempts to guide it do not get there. So I have to set up with another challenging par putt, and thankfully today, I've been making some pretty decent saves. That's a really good par, and I'm still +1 through 7. Dan sets up for his par putt, and just misses this one. He has to settle for a bogey. The 8th hole is very similar to the 6th hole, except for this one, the approach to the green is a little bit over water. So again, I am setting up here with an attempt to be on the right side of the fairway, and this is a nice smooth 5-wood that ends up almost exactly where I envisioned it. That doesn't happen every day in golf. Dan is also attempting to be on the right side here, and he doesn't need to do a draw or anything. He hits a dead straight shot. It ends up going a little bit through the fairway, so he has a tricky shot out of the rough here again. If you've made it this far into the video, you'll have noticed that he's had a hard time hitting shots out of the rough today, and this is another one that goes over the green, and he ends up having to take his 3rd drop of the day. So if you're still watching this, let's click that like button and give Dan some positive vibes. Or if you'd like, you could click the like and subscribe button for myself, as I have some positive vibes on this shot, as I hit it onto the green and it rolls off the little back ridge and gets quite close to the hole with a chance at a birdie putt. Dan ends up being in a really tricky spot for his 4th shot here, as he doesn't really have a confident flop shot in his arsenal, so he has a little pitch here that kicks off the ridge and goes all the way to the other side of the green, which makes a really tricky putt coming back, and he's going to have to settle for a tap-in double bogey. And now we can see that as I set up to my putt, this is the best look I've had at birdie all day, and it's right on line, except it just absolutely hits the brakes at the end there, and that's a tap in for another par. And I know I look disappointed by that birdie putt not going in, but I should actually be very proud of myself that this is one of the cleanest 9 holes I've had in a long time.
No birdies, just call me the Prince of Pars.
And one of the most important things I can suggest to people is that you need to really control your mental mindset. When I am playing a good round like this, the last thing I should be doing is feeling disappointed that I'm playing well. I put that negative thought in my head, and then I do this. I end up missing this green to almost the worst possible spot. It might have even been better to end up in the water and have a short pitch on, but I am on a back hill coming down towards that hole, and after we see Dan's shot here, you will watch me make an absolute mess of my final hole of the day. It is fitting that Dan's camera work leaves a lot to be desired, because so did my own game. That is a very tough way to end a 9th hole after playing so well, but thankfully Dan does the opposite, and even though he has had a struggle today, he has a really nice par save at the end here, and he ends up +10 through 9, which is largely because of so many lost balls that put him in difficult positions. Whereas by me not losing a ball and taking a very conservative approach, we can see that I ended up at a 39, and if we would have played the entire back 9, we could have possibly seen me break 80 for the first time this season. But here is a bonus hole, because we actually only got to play about 3 more holes on this back 9 before we were rained out. But this is Dan on a par 3, hitting a very nice shot, and then setting up with a chance for us to see our one and only birdie in this video. Enjoy.
Yeah, nice drop. Flappy, flappy.
Thanks for watching. See you next time.